In the past, on Sundays, I've answered a lot of your questions, but today I'd like to flip things around. I'd like to ask you a question. This is Sundays at 3 with GTD. Hey everybody, welcome back to Golf Test Dummy, the channel where I use my game to help your game, and this is another episode of Sundays at 3 with GTD, this sort of just junk drawer of my channel. Now, as I said, I have a question for you guys that I would love for you to participate in, and leave me some comments down below at the end of the video when you're done watching it. Don't forget to click thumbs up if you liked it. I've had a question that I asked myself, and now I want to pose it to you guys. So from time to time, artists have to step back from the canvas and take it all in and sort of evaluate the recent things that they've done to the canvas, the recent paint that they've applied. Is it working in the grand scheme of things? The same can be true for just about anything we do in life, whether it be your daily work, whether it be your family life, maybe it's your golf game. And I found myself asking the question and taking a step back and sort of taking it all in and trying to get some perspective on everything. And I said, hey, if you had to sum it up in one simple thought, what would you say is the biggest thing that you've learned in the 2 years that you've been doing YouTube and working on your golf game? I'm talking about what I've learned in my endeavors with all of these swing methods, these different approaches, the setups, the grip changes, the different philosophies on how to play golf and how to hit a golf ball, and all of those experiments through all of the drills and the different teachers. What would I say is the lesson or the moral to the story that I've learned over the course of this 2 years? And I didn't want my answer to be something really pedestrian and something mundane. I wanted it to have some teeth. I wanted it to really be a little bit provocative. I wanted it to be deeper than just what's on the surface, some simple answer. I wanted to come away with something that was really philosophical. And I think I found an answer, and I wanted to give you my answer here and share with you some of my thoughts and see what you think about them. At the end of the day, striking a golf ball well and powerfully and consistently with all sorts of clubs throughout the bag for all different types of shots, it is definitely a game of hand and eye coordination and self-discovery, and the mechanics are not nearly as important as we make them out to be. Let me explain. Here's a good question. Can you honestly teach mechanics to another human being who sees and feels and interacts with the world in a different way than you do? When you relay those mechanics and those positions to somebody, those positions are based off of swing models. And those swing models typically are the pros. And those pros, you can say things like, all pros tend to get into this position, or all pros shallow the club on the way down, or all pros end up with their weight on their front foot. You could say things like that, but at the end of the day, in reality, a person can be told what to do, but not how to do it. Manuel de la Torre made that statement, and I thought I understood it before, but I have a much deeper understanding of it now. And what that means is essentially this, that we all have basically the same body makeup. We're all kind of built the same, with exceptions, of course. But the reasoning behind it being that we all function, our elbows, our arms, our fingers, our hips, our legs, our neck, our spine, it all kind of functions the same way. And that's very true, is that they have many of the same ranges of motion and abilities and movements as a ball and socket joint, or the two bones in the arm that can roll over each other, and the wrist having 360 degrees of motion. All these things, that's very much true for most of the people out there. However, how we use those and how we receive signals in our brain on how it's moving and where it is in space at any given time can be as different as snowflakes or fingerprints. So to that end, if you try and just think about the things that are universal, absolute truths and laws that you could teach to any golfer, they become very few. And I believe that they have to do with everything outside of our body and not inside of our body. I'll try and explain. Now, with that exception, universally, by the rules of golf, we all have to be using essentially the same ball. They may have slightly different dimple patterns or whatever, but they're the same size, they're the same geometric shape, and they react very much the same way. This only understands one thing. The ball only understands what the club imparts on it. This is a golf club. This is a 7-iron. Now, 7-irons look completely different. One looks completely different from the next. Sometimes you get different face shapes. Sometimes you'll get different lofts. You'll get different soles. You'll get different shafts, grips. And all of that is very true. One universal truth applies to this or any 7-iron when you ask yourself how it's going to interact with this golf ball sitting on the grass. Now with this golf ball sitting on the ground, not on a tee, and this or any 7-iron in existence, there is one universal truth that allows this club to interact with that golf ball in the correct way. That one universal truth is that you cannot catch the ball after the swing has bottomed out, after this club head has reached the bottom of its arc. You cannot contact the ball after that low point and expect to get really good contact. You must contact that golf ball with this club traveling at some sort of a downward angle. It could be really steep or it could be fairly shallow, but in any event, that golf ball must come into contact with this club prior to this club reaching the bottom of its arc. That means that the divot has to be in front of the ball. Now, how somebody achieves that can be any number of ways under the sun. There are many different ways. Some are better than others. Some create better dynamics of ball flight, and that is very true. And if you're talking about trying to reach the PGA Tour level and compete with all of these people out there that are just the best of the best of the best, then yes, you probably need to be working on optimized positions and club movements. But for the average golfer who is not trying to be or doesn't even have the potential to be a PGA Tour level player, then the only universal truth is that this club must catch the ball first and the ground after. It must be traveling slightly on a downward descent toward its low point, and that low point has to be on the target side of the golf ball. Here's another universal truth, at least for most of us. Again, people with disability or mobility issues, anything like that, then the rules change. But for the vast majority of people out there, your hands are on the grip of the golf club, and that is the only contact you have with this club when making a swing. Another fairly universal truth is that your feet will be on the ground because there's such a thing as gravity, and so you have to be able to stand on the earth without laying down. You can't make a golf swing when you're laying on your side or you're laying on your back, right? So you have to hold the club with your hands, and you must be standing on the ground, which implies that there is a stance and a grip that you will take on the club. But that stance and grip is not universal. Some people choose to set up really closed. Some people set up really open. Some people set up wide. Some people set up very narrow. And there are examples of people, and there's possibilities for the golf ball to achieve its proper flight from any of those positions. How you hold the club. A lot of people would consider this to be a fairly normal, fairly neutral grip. Square club face, square hands, the angles between the thumb and forefinger pointing toward the right shoulder, that's a fairly neutral grip. But some people can take a very strong grip and play well. Others can take a very weak grip and figure out how to play well. So that's not a universal truth. Now, another universal truth when you're talking about the clubs is that there is a sweet spot, and that sweet spot is most definitely the point of the golf club's head that you want that ball to come into contact with. So you kind of see what I'm getting at here. The only real universal truths in golf are laws of physics, ball flight dynamics, proper club and ball interaction. All of those things are universal truths, and they are really the only thing The only thing in the golf swing or in striking a golf ball, whatever you want to call it, they are literally the only things that every golfer must understand and must achieve in order to strike the golf ball somewhat properly and competently. Everything else is really a matter of opinion. Now, right away, I realize that so many of you out there are going to disagree with this. There's going to be a lot of instructors that if they saw this or if they heard this, they would probably just say nope and they would poo-poo it, and that's fine. I totally get it. I'm just asking for you to consider this for a second and think a little bit deeper into it. Is there really such a thing as a universal golf swing that can be applied to everybody, no matter who you are? I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that it won't be found someday. But my belief in that has wavered. It has wavered greatly. And when we're working on our golf swing, we're working on our mechanics, most of the time teachers are teaching us positions to get into. And those positions oftentimes are based off of either A, their own experiences. They are trying to relate to you what it is that they feel or what has worked for them. That's why they believe so wholeheartedly in what they're teaching. It's because they've tried it, it's worked for them, they've gotten great golf performance out of it, so now it must be the way to play golf. It must be the way to swing the club, and they're trying to relay that to you, and if you would just get it and you would do what they say, then everything would be right with the world, and you too could be a great golfer just as they are. But I would pose this question to you. How do you know how to use a hammer and a nail? Did anybody show you a proper grip on that hammer? Did anybody explain to you what position the hammer should be in at the top, where your elbow should be, what angle the hammer is being held at, and the face angle in relation to where it started from to where it is now, or the arc, the proper arc to come in and strike the nail, or how are you standing? How many degrees of angle? What's the proper, should you be like rotary with a hammer, or should your body be stable and only your arm move? These are all things that are totally relatable to the golf swing. And I dare say that anytime anybody showed you how to use a hammer when you were young, or you just picked up a hammer and you figured it out for yourself, the only thing that you needed to know was how that hammer needed to interact with that nail. From there, everything else was built. You needed to understand what would drive that nail into that board and how this tool was supposed to be used to accomplish that feat. And after some trial and error, somebody explaining, if somebody came up to you and said, okay, the center of the hammer, the flat face, if you come in with a glancing blow, you're just going to bend nails. You have to come in with a dead solid perpendicular strike that lands the center of the hammerhead on top of the center of the nail squarely, over and over and over. Now maybe they would show you them driving some nails to give you an example, but if you were just left to your own devices, eventually you would come to that there's only really one universal truth with a hammer and a nail, is that that hammer head, the face of that hammerhead, has to contact the center of the nail head squarely and with a little bit of force. That's the only universal truth. Everything else is irrelevant. Everything else is for you to figure out how to make it work consistently for you, how to drive nails with the least amount of strokes and dead blows to it. All of those things are up for grabs. People can swing a hammer two hands. People can swing it one-handed. You can use all kinds of different hammers. You can use different kinds of nails. But the same applies. The hammer and nail interaction is the only real universal truth. Now, immediately upon hearing this, you guys are going to think that I'm saying that no swing mechanics and that no positions and that no coaches have any value, and that is not what I'm saying in the least. What I am saying is that the very first thing that we need to understand is how the middle of the club face has to interact with that golf ball and how different clubs are applied to that golf ball in different ways, and they need to contact it at different places in the swing. For example, if it's on a tee, you don't want to catch it on the way down. You want to catch it after it's bottomed out and it's on its way back up, or just as it bottoms out, driver on a tee. An iron or a hybrid or any kind of wood or any kind of club that's sitting on the turf, You must contact that golf ball first before you touch the ground. It has to happen that way in order to achieve proper ball flight dynamics. And ball flight dynamics are universal. How things happen with this club, how it interacts, those ball flight dynamics, they are all based on physics. However, in experimenting with different types of swings, sometimes I'm across the line and I'm really over swinging. Other times I've stopped here and made half swings. I've tried to stop taking the club away so far inside and tried to get it more out here. I've done steep swings. I've done really shallow takeaways. I've played with different setups. I've used wider stances. I've used narrower stances. I've played with ball position. I've really done so many different things. And I can honestly tell you this, I've been able to find success, or at least on some level, with almost all of these swings. And it's not necessarily because each swing is just so great or so revolutionary or it's the perfect swing for me and it just happens to match up. It's because I've been learning how to understand how to apply the club to the ball. And from that, I can set up here and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how I swing. It doesn't matter what my mechanics are or how my grip is. If I'm holding it like this, now I have to swing a different way. So it doesn't matter. I can set up totally closed like this. I cannot set up to the golf ball at all and just walk into it and hit the golf ball. None of it matters. It does matter when you're trying to optimize it. It matters when you're trying to get to a certain level. If you want to get to the PGA Tour level, it's going to be far and few between the people that can swing really funky, like a Bubba Watson or a Jim Furyk or a Matthew Wolff. Those guys, they're there because of how good they are. They're not there because they have incredibly great picturesque swing mechanics, but they apply the club to the ball and they apply those universal truths. Great, top notch. So if you ask me, what is the moral of the story? All of this experimentation, checking out all these different swings, trying all this different stuff. If you ask me the moral to the story, the moral is quite simple. The only thing that we really need to become good at is learning our way to apply this club to that ball, or any of those clubs to that ball in any situation. In the fairway, on a tee, teed high, in the rough, out of a bunker. How does the club need to interact with the ball? That is the only thing that teachers can really teach anybody. Aside from that, it's a matter of hand-eye coordination. It's a matter of going through and practicing and experimenting and figuring out what ball position works for you, what stance and setup works for you, what grip is working for you, all to one end, to make sure that this club interacts with that ball in the correct way, consistently and powerfully. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for all the support, and I'll see you in the next video.